If you want to scale your LinkedIn account from 10 to 50,000 followers profitably and use your content as a magnet for opportunities, leads, customers and clients, speaking engagements, and industry recognition, I'm going to give you a simple framework that you can use in order to do so that doesn't require you to sacrifice your voice, become someone you're not, or post 5 times a day. And I know this works because, well, I've done it for over 300 entrepreneurs and executives over the last 5 years. And in that time, I've built, tested, and refined a system for building highly profitable LinkedIn accounts. Personally, I've used this very system to generate millions from LinkedIn myself and book 30 to 50 high quality appointments in our calendars each and every month, whilst actually growing my audience to over 53,000 followers at the time of recording. So in this video, you'll learn how to evolve your strategy once you've outgrown the basic LinkedIn content strategy, what you should be doing next, the types of content you should be publishing to scale your authority and influence to over 50,000 followers, and a repeatable system for scaling from 10 to 50K without burning out. So if you're ready to break through the plateau and finally join the top 1% of LinkedIn creators, this is the video you need. And at the end of this video, I'll even share how I'm helping a collection of other execs and entrepreneurs to scale their personal brands and become the #1 thought leader in their industry. So thinking about the content strategy we need, there are only ever 3 things that we need to do in order to grow our LinkedIn profiles, build our authority, and generate leads. And I actually explained this in a previous video of mine on how to get from 0 to 10,000 followers on LinkedIn. So if you've not watched that video and want a primer on this, that's a great one to flick back to make sure that you understand the core concepts here. But really, there are only ever 3 things that we have to do when we're building our personal brands on LinkedIn if we want to get the best results. We need to get in front of new people. So we need to find new people that previously didn't know we exist, and we need to get in front of them, because all other things being equal, having more people know who you are is going to be useful in business. It's a bigger pool of people that you can influence and then ultimately convert in the future. Of course, we want those to be somewhat relevant, but we need to increase that pool of people that knows we exist. We've then got to build trust with those people, because having 50,000 followers is great, but if none of them trust you, then it's not going to translate into any meaningful business opportunities for you. And once we've done those 2 things, we're going to be in a position to start turning some of those connections into clients. And that gives us 3 really simple types of content that we publish. We need to publish growth content to increase the pool of people that knows we exist. We publish authority content to build trust with that existing pool of followers. And then we publish conversion content to actually convert those followers into leads or opportunities for our business. Now, I explained in the last video that I made that a typical recommendation for how you might distribute this content is 40-40-20. So 40% of your content should be growth-based content, 40% of your content should be authority, and only 20% actually needs to be conversion. And that is the exact breakdown that I would use if I was looking to scale from 10 to 50K followers in the next 12 months. But now that you've got to your first 10,000 followers, you want to be thinking about some more advanced strategies for actually scaling up that audience and building on the foundation that you've already got. So typically we would treat these 3 types of content as separate content types. We would have our growth content for building our audience, our authority content for building trust with those people, and our conversion content for turning them connections into clients. And we'd see this as a traditional marketing funnel. The growth content gets people into your network, authority content nurtures them, and then your conversion content actually gets them and turns them into leads. And this is the formula I've used, yes, to generate hundreds of thousands of views on some of my content, but also book high quality appointments in our calendars each and every week. But as you start to grow your audience and you get to 10,000 followers, you want to be thinking about how you can start to actually use all of these elements in the same post. So typically we see these as individual posts. So one post will be focused on growth content, one focused on authority content, and one on conversion content. And that's exactly what I advise if you're going from 0 to your first 10,000 followers. But as you're looking to scale your account, you want to start bringing elements of each of these into the same piece of content. And I'm going to show you a system that you can use to do that, so you can write viral, authoritative, and high converting content in one go. And this really is the foundation of world-class posts. Now, the first thing you need to be doing is finding the angle. The reason this is so important as you scale from 10 to 50,000 followers is because the same thing can either be very interesting or very boring depending on how you frame that concept. So if you take the example of like 5 content tips, compared to how I write world-class content? Which of those seems more interesting to you? 5 content tips anyone could publish, but how I write world-class content is something that only a very specific few people could post. There's a lot more appeal to it. So you really need to think about the angles that you're using in content now. Just sharing content is no longer enough, right? You're at the stage where you've got your 10,000 followers, you're trying to get up to 50, you need to think slightly more advanced than just getting content out there. So the first thing I want you to do is find the angle. And some of the best angles that you can use are angles that create curiosity. So if people are left having to know what happens next or having to know what you're going to share, if they're unexpected. So an unexpected angle might be something like what I learned about leadership from buying my team coffee every single day. Right, so that's not like buying coffee is not typically associated with leadership. So there's an unexpected connection there. Something that's surprising. So surprising angle might be something like I stopped tracking my team's hours and our productivity increased. That's not something that you would typically expect or not something that people see a lot. And something contrarian is where you take a different opinion to the rest of the industry. The master of this is someone called Cody Sanchez, who has a lot of opinions on like contrarian approaches to investing, things that aren't obvious to the typical person. So you want to find an interesting angle in all of the content that you share if you want it to perform better. Then you actually have to introduce your concept through a really strong hook in a engaging way that's going to stop the scroll, stop people scrolling in their feed and get them to actually consume the post. And the best way to do this is to pass interrupt. We can do this by using cliffhangers, which is great for story-based content, or by promising value, promising a big payoff, which is great for more value-based, typically educational content. If you fail this, like the rest of your post doesn't matter, because when you scroll LinkedIn, you'll notice there is a see more button between the first 1 or 2 lines of your post and the rest of the content. So someone has to actually stop the scroll in their feed and click that see more button to see the rest of your post. And if you can't get past this stage, nothing else is going to matter. And the 2 best ways to do that are through cliffhangers and by promising value. But you can elevate each of these by adding in a few extra elements. So one way you can do this is by pre-solving objections. So anticipate objections that people might have to implementing the advice that you're sharing. Like an obvious one, right, is this is going to be too long to implement. Like it's going to take too much time, or it's going to be too expensive to do, or I'm going to have to do something I don't want to. So anticipate objections that people might have and pre-solve them in your hook. Because if you can get them to overcome their objection to doing this in the hook, they are far more likely to read it and therefore to engage, which is only going to boost your content's performance in the algorithm. Layer in some personal authority. This is really important as you scale. You need to be seen as a person of authority. If you want to consistently attract and retain followers whilst signing clients, you need to be seen as someone of authority. So see how you can embed milestones that you've reached personally or results that you've had personally into the hook of your content. Also emphasize the value people are going to get. So what is going to be the impact of the advice that you're sharing, or future pace? So what's going to happen in their lives once they implement the advice you're sharing here? That's another great way to hook people in. If you can be extreme or contrarian, it's going to stand out in the feed. So you want to be at one end of the extremity scale, right? You never really want to like sit in the middle or be on the fence, because it just doesn't capture attention. Address a specific audience as well. So if you've got a specific audience that you're looking to reach, actually addressing those people in the content is a great way to capture their attention and get them to consume and make them feel like this is just for them. Using a specific number is a tried and tested formula as well. This is one of the most reliable ways to increase your performance. Rather than saying, here's my best advice for doing XYZ, you want to share a number of steps or a number of tips. Here are my 7 steps to XYZ, whatever that result is. Use an I statement. So a big difference here between how to and how I. So you want to share how I content, because truthfully anyone could publish how to do something, but only you can publish how I. If we look at the initial example I shared here, I shared 5 content tips, which also could have been positioned as how to write good content and how I write world-class content. Sharing how you do something adds a lot of personal authority and makes it feel like this content could only come from you. So always use an I statement rather than a how to statement. And include comparison and contrast. Across all channels, this is consistently a reliable way to generate more engagement, because our brains can process comparison and contrast a lot quicker. Our brains process information either through associations or comparisons. So if you can create a comparison, it's really easy for someone to understand the principle you're sharing and therefore engage or follow you off the back of it. You might also consider using an anti-hook. So typically these hooks are quite structured, but actually starting sometimes by just going straight into the body of the content without having any form of hook, like a list, we've seen that to be really, really effective. Once you've hooked people in, you need to make the body of your content really easy to consume. Because if your content is not easy to consume, it doesn't matter how valuable it is, people are just going to go on to the next post that is easy to read. People are lazy and fickle, and they're not going to go to the effort of consuming content just because supposedly it's valuable. It needs to be easy for them to scan. And remember, people are probably consuming this content from their phone, where maybe they're traveling, they're distracted, there's loads of notifications going off, loads of stimuli in their environment, and they're really distracted. So we've got to make it as easy as possible for them to do that. And the way to do that is by using white space, short sentences, and grade 5 reading, because actually most Americans are lower than grade 5 reading level. And using white space and short sentences makes it easy to scan a piece of content and get the gist of the post, potentially then engage, like, comment, react, repost, without actually consuming the entire thing. And as you scale from 10 to 50,000 followers, you're really looking to maximize every single opportunity you can to get engagement on your content, because that's going to fuel your growth. So if you can make it such that someone doesn't even have to consume the whole piece of content but can still engage, you're going to massively increase the number of people you're able to reach. You then want to make sure you're sharing frameworks and processes in your content, because the perceived likelihood of success when you do that is far higher. As you go through these, keep solving objections. I mentioned in the hook that people automatically come up with objections or reasons as to why they can't do something or why they won't. So you need to continuously solve those and show people that it's going to be easy for them to implement what you're sharing. Use lists where you can to condense information and make it easier to consume. Signpost the value. So throughout your content, you want to use like rehooks, right, to signpost the value as you go through. You might use phrases like, and here's the thing, let me explain. And this is important because these short sentences hook people back in, they get people's attention back into the post, and they signal that you're about to share something important. So if you have those embedded throughout your post, you're kind of re-hooking people in every few lines, and people's attention is going to stay on the post. You can use patterns like 1-3-1. So a 1-3-1 pattern might look something like this. So you have one, maybe slightly longer line, 3 lines together, and then 1 line again. Really easy to consume. Rather than if we had kind of no structure to this at all, and we just had lots of paragraphs, it becomes very difficult to read, right? You can see how the 1-3-1 format, if this was all text, would be far easier to consume. You also make sure throughout you're always embedding your authority. This needs to be subtle though, because if it looks like you're trying too hard to do this, it's actually going to have the opposite effect to what you want. It's going to detract from your authority. But subtly embedding your authority might just include like short statements around how you've used the advice you're sharing here to get results yourself or for your clients. That builds up your authority. You want this to almost feel like a passing comment. If it feels like you're trying too hard to tell people that you're an authority in the space, it has the opposite effect. It wants to look like you're not trying. So it needs to just be a passing comment, and it's going to have the biggest effect. And make the whole content non-obvious or contrarian. Make it things that someone hasn't thought of before or goes against the grain of what people typically say. Once you've shared the body of the content, you need to essentially say what you said in the best way possible. And that's what we do in the takeaway. Think of your takeaway like your mic drop moment. If you're delivering a keynote on stage, you've just been talking for 20, 30 minutes, an hour, and then you get to the end and you deliver that final kind of couple of words, couple of phrasings that you want people to remember, and you drop the mic and you walk off stage and everyone applauds. That's the kind of feeling we want to create with our takeaway. It should say what you've said in the post in the most catchy, appealing, understandable way possible. Kind of like if you were going to turn your entire post into a 2-line tweet, what would you write? It's going to be really memorable, and often people are actually going to take that catchy takeaway and use it as the basis of their comment. So if you analyze a lot of high-performing content, what you'll find is that all of the comments are along the same theme, or say essentially different ways of saying the takeaway of that post. So find the takeaway and then look at the comments. They're often very, very similar. But in order for that to happen, it has to be catchy. Okay, so make sure the takeaway is catchy and appealing way to summarize the post in a kind of clever way. You then have the PS section, which, in emails, the PS section is actually the second most read part of an email after the subject line. And in LinkedIn posts, they're really, really powerful as well. This is a chance to add a call to action. That might be to convert them into a lead, but it also might just be to get them to engage. So your call to action might be, leave a comment or drop a like if you found this useful, or repost to share this with your network. You can also use it to add further value. So adding further value is another opportunity to give people something to comment if it supplements what you've already shared in the post. You can demonstrate authority with subtly embedding it. Make sure again that it's subtle as you do this. You don't want it to seem too obvious. Or it could just be something that's completely personal. It could just break down the fourth wall and be something maybe not as relevant to the post, but entirely personal. And again, that gives people something to comment around. So what you maybe noticed as we go through this, as we've gone through the angle, the hook, the body, the takeaway, and the PS, is that we're constantly just giving people opportunities to comment. I mentioned before that scaling from 10,000 to 50,000 followers, you're constantly looking to maximize opportunities for people to like, comment, repost, or spend longer on your post, because that's going to drive your performance in the algorithm and get your really high authority content in front of more people. And all of these are just opportunities for people to do this. When most people post, they just share the value in an unformatted way. And there's one opportunity to engage, which is someone has to read the entire post and then think of a comment. But here we're dotting opportunities to engage throughout the content in different places and different styles. The final way we can do that is with our creative. This is probably the biggest lever for increasing engagement as you scale from 10 to 50,000 followers. Your creative should complement or supplement the copy that you use in the post. So your creative is video, it could be image, it could also be a carousel. Those are the three most common forms of creative that you can include. You want these to complement the creative. So you don't want to say two completely different things. They should be related and supplement each other, but you also don't want to say the same thing in each one. And also each of them should make sense on their own, but make even more sense together, right? So if you took away the image or the creative or the video, could someone just read the text and get some value out of it and understand? Similarly, if you took away the text completely, could someone just consume the creative and still engage? Let me show you an example of this. So this here. This is an example of a piece of creative that I included with this text. You can see the text here is quite long. Someone could read this text and they could get a lot of value from it, as maybe if you've been skimming this now, you can probably get some value from that. But the image here is really important. If you take away the text and you just have this quote which says every market is becoming crowded but no one can replicate you, that's still a small piece of value that you could take away and go, yeah, it's that light bulb moment in their mind. You might agree with it and therefore repost to show that you agree with it. You might just drop a like. So this creative makes sense on its own, but when you read it in the context of the entire post, they go together really well. So again, the creative is another opportunity for you to give people chances to engage. And this is probably the biggest lever you have as you scale from 10 to 50,000 followers, is focusing on really high quality creative. Now, one final thing to show you if you're looking to grow your LinkedIn account is you want to start thinking about why people actually follow others online. There are a few reasons why people might follow you online. One of the most obvious ones is to be educated. That's the one we typically think of. People want to consume your content to get value so that they can implement it and learn, get a better result in their business, improve their lives. But some of the missed ones are to be entertained. If you can embed entertainment into the education and into the value you're sharing, it's another reason why someone might consume content from you or engage with you. So if you're naturally witty or funny, try and include that into the value that you're sharing. Often people, it's just to be inspired. So often you don't necessarily have to have the most detailed content. It can just be that little light bulb moment that flicks a switch in someone's brain and gives them that moment of inspiration. They're going to come back to you time and time again. So it doesn't always have to come from educating, sharing loads of detail. It could just be a quick win that you give people. Also, people want to be nosy, right? We're naturally nosy people. That's why you follow your favorite celebrities on Instagram. You want to be nosy and you want an insight into their lives, and your audience are exactly the same. So can you give them an insight into the behind the scenes of the business, or I don't think you should share too much of your personal life, but can you break down the fourth wall that is it's an invisible wall that's there on LinkedIn? Can you break that down and be a little bit more personal, show people what you're up to, maybe show the behind the scenes of your business? That's another way to get people to engage, follow you, is to be allow them to be nosy, give them opportunities to be nosy. Now look, the material in this video will help you scale from 10 to 50,000 followers, but if you're serious about building your personal brand and becoming a go-to in your industry, it's not just this specific part that you need the entire system, and you also need the accountability and the implementation of this. And that's exactly what I'm helping a group of highly ambitious entrepreneurs and execs to do in our Thought Leaders Accelerator. So if you want to 10x your visibility and your credibility in the next 90 days without wasting hours trying to figure it out yourself or hiring really expensive media teams, hit the link in the description and secure a seat on our next accelerator. Now look, seats for this are limited because we want to make sure we can actually provide enough value to each and every member. So I can't actually guarantee that there's going to be seats available when you see this video. So click the link below to find out. And if there are, we'd love to have a conversation about welcoming you into the accelerator. And of course, if you found this video useful, drop a like and hit subscribe so you see more content like this in the future. And why don't you go ahead and drop your #1 personal branding goal into the comments, because research shows that if you share your goals, you're actually 40% more likely to achieve it just from the accountability you get from sharing it with the world. So let me know in the comments, what is your #1 goal for building your personal brand?